Welcome to Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Bobbi Pominville, and I'm your reporter on the arts. And today I'm going back to the Phipps with a really wonderful story about a musical that's playing there. So I want to welcome Chris Babbitt to the show.
Thank you, Bobbi. It's great to be here.
And I'm just so intrigued by this because your mother wrote a novel called Tuck Everlasting.
Yes, she did.
And I understand she wrote many books.
I think the count is about 14 novels, Bobbi.
So that must have been really interesting growing up in a house like that.
It was wonderful to watch her work. Just amazing.
And this one, we're going to get into depth a little bit about the story, but first of all, how were you personally involved in her novels and the musicals and the books and promoting them?
Well, that's a great question. She made it pretty much a habit to include her kids in her books, usually as one of the central characters, at least the drawings that she did. So I appear in one of her early novels called The Search for Delicious as a young boy. So I'm about 10 years old or so, and those drawings are of me. But all our family has been represented in her books over the years. So that's really been fun.
That's amazing. I mean, I've never heard of something like that. And you just mentioned a little tidbit that I wanted to bring out, and that is that she also was the artist for this book.
She was. She started out actually as an artist. That was really her career goal. And that changed a little bit because my father actually wrote the first book that was published that my mom did the artwork on. Way back, a picture book called The 49th Magician. But his career went in a completely different direction after that, and so my mother took up writing. But her artwork appears in all of her books.
That is amazing.
Art was very close to her, for sure.
That must be so wonderful to feel that you could write it, not only compose it and all the ideas, and then you're also doing the drawing.
It was wonderful. The cover
amazed.
of Tuck Everlasting is actually a picture of a cabin that the family used to have in upstate New York on a small pond, which is very much the setting for the Tuck cottage in the book. And I remember watching her do those drawings and just being amazed. And I still am. Anybody who can put pen to paper and produce something beautiful has got my respect, that's for sure.
That's for sure. I respect people like that too a lot. And even in people who write novels, because you have to have such a wealth of knowledge for that. So anyway, now I gave you a little warning. I do want you to tell me a little synopsis of the story.
I'd be happy to do that, Bobbi.
Thank you.
One of the things I might say before I do that is one of the things that was really important to my mother as a writer was taking on themes that other writers generally weren't taking on. She always felt that younger children were capable of handling issues that were more complex and more emotionally laden. And so Tuck Everlasting is the story of a little girl about 10 years old who is growing up during Victorian times in the U.S. in a very strict household where she was to speak in a certain way, dress in a certain way, behave in a certain way. And so she is dreaming of the outside world, of being able to see the world beyond the fence around her house. And one day she decides to run away from her house into the nearby woods that her family actually owns. So it's not far from home, but she runs away, and in the process she sees a young man in the wood drinking from what appears to be a stream running near a large tree. And she's curious, and she introduces herself. And before long, something odd happens because she decides she would like a drink. And the young man says, oh no, you shouldn't drink that. It's not not good for you. And she says, well, I just saw you drinking. And then we begin to understand the basis of the story, which is that it turns out the stream is essentially the fountain of youth, or the fountain of eternal life. And this young man and his family, without realizing that, had drank from it quite a long time before Winnie's meeting this young man in the woods. And they've always been scared that someone would find it and exploit it by selling, for example, little vials of water that would make you live forever. So the book is really about the question of, if you had the opportunity to live forever, would you do that? Or would you not? And so the story really explores both sides of that,
Yes.
and is just a wonderful tale about this family.
Oh, that's just right away just intrigued me. And I started to think about when I was a little girl and dreaming about things, and then wondering about things that were not really in my area or in my realm. But anyway, something like that, it's like a mystery in a way.
It is.
And I just love that, because I love it when I come to a show. Let's say I'm going to the Phipps and I don't understand it all, or I'm intrigued by some of it. So anyway, that is a great, great synopsis. So that Tuck family, and the way it was made into a musical, would be a question for me. How far back? Has it been years since that was done? And then where did it go from being a musical in a theater to something else?
Yeah, well, I can give you sort of a timeline, if you will,
Yeah.
Bobbi. It's kind of fascinating. The
Okay.
book was originally published in 1975,
Okay.
so it's about to come up on its 50th anniversary in 2025. But in 2002, Disney decided to make a full-length feature film of Tuck Everlasting. And honestly, my mom was not terribly happy about that, because she really wanted the book to remain as the book. And she knew on some level that to make a film from the book would change it somewhat. And she turned out to be right on one level, in that the movie did make changes to the book. I should say I really liked the movie. I think generally speaking it was well received, but my mother was certainly a purist when it came to her writing, and that was a hard time in her life in some ways when the film came out. But for us as her family, what a treat to be invited to the movie set and to watch it being produced and put together was an amazing experience. But about, well, let's say 14 years or so, I think it was, after that, the show or the book was made into a Broadway musical.
Oh, yes.
And the musical took about 7 years to come to fruition from the first discussions about doing it. But it debuted on Broadway in April of 2016 with all the hubbub, as you might imagine, around a Broadway premiere.
Yes.
My mother was able to get there, although she was in decline at that time in her life, but she was able to be there and to take in the spectacle, really, that a Broadway opening is. And all of us family tagging along, taking advantage of those great opportunities to be a part of that was wonderful.
That is so wonderful. And also the fact that Disney would approve it and actually put it into their literature, their libraries, what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Because they have all those wonderful musicals.
They do. They
Okay,
do.
now tell me about the music. How did the music come about then?
Well, this was certainly a learning curve for me and my family in beginning to get some sense about how all of that works.
Yes.
The producers of the show hired writers, hired songwriters and lyricists and other people to do that work. But I'm happy to say they really sought out input from my mother through the whole process. So unlike with the film, she was involved more or less from the beginning of the musical. We took a couple of trips to New York to see the early choreography and to meet the director of the show, who was a gentleman named Casey Nicholaw, who's a very famous Broadway director. We were all thrilled that he was part of this. And it was a remarkable thing to watch it slowly take shape.
Yes.
And then finally appear on the stage in New York.
That's so exciting because, you know, so many times that doesn't happen. So this is just really quite a goal that your mother has met now, where she's had two different really important ways to get that movie out there or the play out there. And I do know that's quite a feat. And did you tell me, I forgot now, did you tell me it took about 7 years?
Took about 7 years for the Broadway show to make it from beginning concepts to opening. Yep.
Right,
Yep.
right. Wow, that's a long time.
Quite a long process.
And I'm sure she was involved.
She was.
And must have been a little bit difficult when they would change things.
I think by then she had finally accepted that the musical was not going to be the book.
Yeah.
Although the musical, I think she would say, is much more true to the story than the movie was. Interestingly, in the movie, they make Jessie and Winnie have an actual love affair.
Oh, okay.
Which is not part of the novel at all, because Winnie is 10 and Jessie is 17. But in the movie, they're much closer in age, and they have a whole relationship back and forth, which was not part of the book. But I should say, I loved the movie. The cinematography is beautiful. I loved the music.
Well, that's so great.
Quite a lineup of actors and actresses to be a part of it,
And
which was really exciting.
Just back up a little. Did you tell me it's still on? You can find it on TV?
You definitely can find the movie on television.
Wow.
It pops up fairly regularly.
Yeah.
And of course, it's been out on CD and all of that stuff for quite a while now.
Right.
But
of course.
the thing that I've found extraordinary, Bobbi, is that when you bring up the book in polite conversation, so many people know about it and have read it.
Oh, wow.
It's a 4th and 5th grade book, so most kids have read it in school.
Oh, okay.
And then their parents have reread it later on or know about it. So when it comes up, people are always thrilled that there they get to meet, a member of Natalie's family to talk about the book. Yeah.
And didn't you tell me that one time you had an opportunity to act?
Years ago, in 2008, the Phipps undertook putting Tuck Everlasting on the stage in the Black Box Theater.
Yes.
And there is a stage play, which is not a musical, that is also out there, incidentally written by my brother-in-law. And then there is the musical as a separate production. But this was not the musical. This was the stage play that we did at the Phipps.
Okay.
And I was thrilled to get the part of Pa Tuck and to act with some terrific people and to give it a try. I think we did okay. It was great fun.
Oh, I think that's so neat that you got to do that.
I was thrilled, and so was she.
Part of your mother's production. I just love that. Now, what ages do you think this would be good for?
Well, that's a good question, Bobbi. I understand that the current Phipps production is 10 through 12th grade, which I think is perfect in many ways. The Broadway show, you won't be surprised to hear, was all adults, even those who were playing the younger parts. Winnie, though, was the youngest in the show. She was close to her actual age, 10 or 11.
Oh, good.
A remarkable little girl with a voice that could fill a Broadway theater quite easily.
Wow.
But everybody else in the show, definitely adults.
Yeah.
But I think one of the neat things about this show is that it really does work for younger actors to do it.
Yes, definitely.
And the Phipps couldn't be a better place to
Oh,
to
yeah,
put it on.
yeah. And I know they're very careful to screen, you know, because, well, sometimes there's one that the director might bring out something a little different and it doesn't quite fit.
Right.
And that happened to us just a few months ago down there. So it says it's good for age 4 and up. So for an audience, you
That's
could bring
probably
your
right.
children.
I think you can, yes.
Yeah.
There's a climactic scene in the show in the second act, which is a little unsettling, but certainly nothing graphic or inappropriate in any way, even for little kids.
Oh, good.
So I think, yeah, I think 4 and above fits pretty well.
Well, I have to say, this is just very exciting for me to hear about all this. And I love the theme. I'm amazed at your mother for doing that and the artwork. And you know, that's her production, so I can see why she would be a little leery of how they're changing things. And were you kind of in the background helping her then?
We as kids, I'm the oldest
weren't
of
that
3, Bobbi,
old
so
yet.
there's 3 of us. When the
okay.
book was published, I had just started college.
Oh,
So I remember her writing it when I was in high school.
okay.
And she would sit on the couch in our living room in upstate New York, where we lived at the time, with a long legal pad, a yellow pad,
Oh, yeah.
and hand write the entire book.
Wow.
So that was how she worked in those days.
Yeah, that's the way it was done then.
By hand until she was really ready to type it, then she would do that. But it was handwritten and erased and carefully worked, and
Oh, my.
she was a wordsmith in the truest meaning of that word. She loved nothing more than to change words around, turn them inside out and upside down. And if we have a moment, I could share kind of a neat story about that.
We do. We
Bobbi.
have a moment.
Well, she was giving me and a good friend of mine a ride home one day after he had been at our house. And his name was Tom Evans. And Tom's still out there. And we were just playing around with her in the car and thought, now let's see if we can say each other's names backwards.
Ooh.
And it turns out Tom Evans backwards is Mott Snave, which my mother just loved the minute she heard it. And she ended up using that name as a character in one of her books.
Really?
And that is so much the way she operated. She'd hear something or pick up a bit or a piece of a phrase or would turn a word around and go, oh, I like the way that sounds. One of those people that would do the Sunday New York Times puzzle in ink, which I always thought was crazy. I have never completed one and don't expect that I will. So she loved words, and when she would write her books, she'd do a sentence and then she'd erase a little bit and put a word in, and she almost literally did it sentence by sentence at times. She was very persnickety about that kind of stuff, which I think really shows in her writing.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm just amazed at, you know, how the way she comprehended literature and English, and how some people struggle with it. But I mean, she must have been well read too, and
She was.
she had all these ideas for books.
She definitely did. She was a huge fan of the great children's book writers. Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland
I love it.
was a book that she just loved.
Oh, my.
And yes, I think what's really been exciting over the long term, Bobbi, with her is that, ironically, even though she passed away in 2016, the fact that Tuck Everlasting is out there means that in some ways she is going to live forever.
Oh, yes.
In the sense that people will be reading her work
Yes.
forever, essentially.
That's right.
And so each iteration of the stage play or the musical, or when we see the
Yes.
movie come around, it's just another reminder that she's very much still out there. And
Oh, I think that's
enjoying it.
just a wonderful thought for you as a son to know that. Now, did she write a lot of children's books?
Pretty much all of her books were children's
Oh, they
books.
all were pretty
Yeah.
much. Okay.
Yep. She did write a book for a little bit older group, maybe a teenage
Okay.
group,
Yeah.
which is actually my favorite of her books,
Oh.
which is called Herbert Robarge. It's an unusual name. Again, there's the hero
Another
of the
one
book.
of those play on words
She's
kind
come
of
up with the
things.
name.
Yeah. I hear
And it
you.
doesn't have as many pictures in it as some of her other stuff.
Oh.
It's more really a page turner of a novel.
Okay.
I would recommend to people, if they can find it, that they read that
Oh, yeah.
and take a look at some of the other stuff that she's done.
Interesting.
Very much so. Feel
Very interesting.
Very blessed to have grown
Well,
up
this
with
is such fun to talk to you, and
Thank you.
you being that up close with your mother and seeing exactly how she did things and how she wrote. Oh, that's just delightful. I really enjoy that. So now I do want to tell our audience that the musical opened last Friday, February 16th. And it's now a little bit into February, but it runs through March 3rd. So you have plenty of time if you want to get your tickets. And I do know it's on weekends. And I noticed both Saturdays and Sundays have a 2 o'clock show.
That's right.
And I believe the others are 7.
That's correct. I think so, Bob.
So it's perfect timing if the people listening, I'm hoping, would have the desire to come to the Phipps and see it. And the Phipps is beautiful. It's in downtown Hudson. You can't miss it. It's on the river.
It's a beautiful place.
I think I have to say that I've been so impressed with the Phipps and their drama section. And I'm actually in the music part of it more because I'm on the music council. And I've sung in the choirs and done things like that, and also helped to choose the shows. So I remember voting on this.
Well,
because
it's very exciting.
when first we had to recommend the music shows, strictly music shows. But then the next meeting would be everything put together in one. And I believe our director then, Ben, would have decided on the ones pretty much. But then we were able to discuss and give input and so on. So yeah, I do remember the name coming up and I thought, what is that? I teaching music for 36 years in elementary schools. I should have known that name.
Well, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for
it
the
is.
Phipps to be doing it, and I'm looking
so
forward to
glad
seeing
it's
it.
there. And I'm encouraged right now myself to get some tickets.
I think you'll really enjoy it, Bobbi. It's a
I think I would.
timeless story.
Yes.
That's what really stands out, I think, and it's going to be exciting to see those kids put this on.
And I love musicals, of course. And I love it when I can watch children of all different ages achieving something like that. It's really quite a thing for them. A lot of camaraderie.
Very exciting.
I love it. And I do have the number, although I do think we're going to put it at the bottom of the screen. And it's 715-386-2305. And it's very easy to do online too, because I've actually achieved that a few times myself. And then you can either pick it up at the box office or you can come by and do it that way, or you can have it sent. Unless it's the next day, of course.
Right.
But anyway, so you've got a lot of days left. And you can't, I think it's a wonderful outing if you want something to do on a weekend. It would intrigue your mind. You probably get into that dream of everlasting life, seen through, well, a child's eyes. And then I just love stories like that. I think it's so well written. But anyway, I just want to encourage people. So I want to thank you, Chris. I just met you today, but I feel like I know you.
Thank you, Bobbi. This has been great.
It's been wonderful talking to you. And I want to thank our audience for watching my show and for listening. And I hope you'll consider going to this musical. I would encourage it. So thank you again for watching.